Hello and welcome to Chapter 10, Section 3. This one is on sample spaces. A sample space includes all of the possible outcomes. So, for example, Lucia flips 2 quarters. What are all the possible outcomes and how many outcomes are in the sample space? This is 2 different questions. So the possible outcomes for flipping 1 quarter is going to be head or tail. But what are the possible outcomes if you flip 2 quarters? Well, the first one, you could flip heads on the first one and heads on the second. You could flip heads on the first one and tails on the second. You could flip tails and then heads, tails and then tails. So you have to walk through all of the possible outcomes and then answer the 2 questions. What are the possible outcomes? Are heads, 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 tails, and so on. And how many of them are you? And that's just counting. There are 4 possible outcomes. If you are asking about rolling a number cube, the possible outcomes, there are 6 of them. Possible outcomes for rolling 2 dice, there are going to be 36 of them. So you've got to watch out for how many they're asking for. One of the things they ask you to do is to figure things out that are a little more complicated with what are called tree diagrams. And this is what a tree diagram looks like. They're asking you to spin 2 spinners, and one of them looks like this. Of course, they're all done equally. And one of them looks like this with just 2, a 1 and a 2 here. And what they're asking for is to use a tree diagram to find the sample space, to find all of the possible outcomes. Well, so here, the first thing you could do is you could spin a red. And if you spin a red the first time, what are your possible outcomes on the second one? You could have a 1 or you could have a 2. First, you could do a blue, and then you could do a 1 or a 2. And then first you could do a green and a 1 or a 2. And if you count the number that's on the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that gives you all the possible outcomes. You could have a red 1, a red 2, a blue 1, a blue 2, and on and on. There are 6 total outcomes. So if the question asks you how many there are, you can just count. And if it asks you what they are, you have to do R1, R2, B1, B2, that kind of thing. And what this eventually gets to is something called a fundamental counting principle. This is the total number of outcomes, all the individual outcomes multiplied together. So for example, in our flipping 2 quarters, each of the quarters had 2 possible outcomes. Quarter 1 could be heads or tails, quarter 2 could be heads or tails. And if you multiply those together, you end up with 4 possible outcomes. The spinners here today, we figured them out with tree diagrams so that we could be very specific. It's nice to visualize, and I do these when I'm sorting through things a lot. But you have the ability to just look at it and say, well, I've got 2 spinners. And spinner number 1 has 3 choices, and spinner number 2 has 2 choices. So the total number of outcomes I'm going to get is 6, because I can just multiply them together. They're going to ask you for total outcomes for a lot of things. Rolling a number cube, spinning a 3-spot spinner, tossing a coin, picking a card. So all of these you're going to have to take into account when you're answering homework questions like this. So have in mind as to what all of the examples stand for, and they're in your book if you need to go back and look at them. But the homework questions are pretty straightforward. I would recommend drawing pictures when you need to so you can see what they're talking about, and then go back and really read the question. Are they asking how many, or are they just asking, are they asking specifically what are the answers? Okay? Good luck, and bring back any questions you have. Thank you much.